Alrighty, my friends, it's time yet again for my rental car review. This time I've gotten sort of car TM. It's a 2023 Chevy Malibu standard edition. I wish it was a manual. It is in fact an automatic. It's got a 4-cylinder, 1.5 liters, making 160 horsepower to drag this 3,300 pound vehicle up to 60 miles an hour in about 9 seconds. It's got a slush box transmission. I'll talk about that in a second. It's kind of endearing in like a shitty old Honda way. I don't think there's anything exceedingly egregious about this. It is just a car. I do like their integration with the third brake light up top. It's kind of cool. It doesn't come into the cabin. It's actually out of the cabin. They've got a little bit of a body line going on past the antenna as well here. That's kind of cool. But I don't know. I will say the paint job is fine. I think it's kind of funny that I got effectively an old man tan car. It does look gray in certain lights and more brownish tan in others. It's really feels like GM parts bin. I'm sure it is. So it's got keyless entry, which is kind of nice. And honestly, for I think an MSRP of about $25,000, it's not that bad in here. I'm gonna click it to accessory mode and roll the window down so I don't melt. Automatic windows, of course, but only on the driver, up and down. So that's not bad. So, I'll give you the wide angle view here. It's not too bad in here. I think the interior is fine. There's nothing sort of, I don't know how to turn this off. I don't know how push button starts work. All right, and it beeps at you because it thinks I left the keys in the car. Anyway, I think the interior is fine. It's got this odd, sort of fabric surround. It's slightly squishy to the touch, but not very squishy. It continues on the doors on both sides. And overall, I think the doors flow nicely into the dashboard and stuff. I think the sort of build quality in here is just fine. A lot of plastic, nothing too unexpected, I would say. And I think you can really tell that this is a car built for old people, which I'll again talk about in a moment. A couple things that I don't like in here. This sensor light bar thing, it's actually a strip of red LEDs. You can see in the reflection here on the window. It blinks at you when it thinks you're gonna hit somebody. And it's loose already. This car's got 8,000 something miles on it. It's a 2023. So that's kind of weird. Don't really care for that. And otherwise pretty well done dashboard in front of you, very simple. And then this thing's just you can see how much that flexes. Some things that I do like about the interior are actually the rear view mirror, but only part of the rear view mirror. I like the shape of the rear view mirror because the way it curves up on the ends, it doesn't take up much space visually out the driver window or out the front window. And it curves up where you're already going to be intersecting the rear passenger headrests. So because you can't see past those rear passenger headrests at a sort of standard driver view, the way it curves, just about like that, kind of keeps those out of the way and keeps this footprint small. Now it does have the gummiest flip up. There is no detent in this direction. It's just sort of mushy the whole way, which is kind of gross. Nitpick for sure, but I don't know. Other things about the interior, I actually don't mind the steering wheel. It's got all the controls kind of where they need to be. I can turn my lane assist off and on with just a button on the steering wheel, which is quite nice. And this is easy to navigate. And with all of that, there's actually buttons on the back of the steering wheel. This side is volume up and down, and the other side has the same set of buttons for track next and track backwards. It has automatic high beams, which seem to work pretty well. I don't trust them, so I didn't, I kept them off. The headlight switch is down here, along with the dashboard brightness switch, which when you touch it, gets happy to see you, so you can actually turn it. And this is kind of where I start to take some issues with the vehicle. So this dashboard and this seating position, I've kind of gotten it set up so that I'm sitting an appropriate distance back. My arms have an appropriate bend in it when I touch the steering wheel. And by the way, the steering wheel is fine. I'm not a fan of the way they've kind of sculpted this bit here. It's just a little weird. I think it's so you can hold it up here, but my fingers don't fit in the little sculpting that they've done. So I've been driving, 9 and 3 instead of 10 and 2. It's a nice small steering wheel. It's a responsive steering, totally fine. Like it's a car. In terms of the interior, things are angled weirdly, and you can kind of tell that it's a car built for old people, but also they've missed a few things for it being a car built for old people. So at my position here, my dash gauges are not really angled up at me. They're kind of angled down and away from me. They're almost perpendicular to the ground, which it's just kind of the first thing I noticed when I got in the car is the angle. And it's hard to pick up on camera, but maybe you can kind of see that, how flat they are. And I think that angle there works fairly poorly with the angle here. And again, if I kind of come in the side, look at the angle on that infotainment. It is like, it's sharp compared to the dashboard. It's just kind of odd. It doesn't really have much cohesiveness between the dashboard and this infotainment. Now, the infotainment is fine. It's a standard sort of Android Auto touch screen. It's got CarPlay too, of course. You have a physical power button and volume knob, as well as physical buttons to get to quick settings and things like that, as well as skip forward and backwards, along with the steering wheel buttons for those. It also has full analog controls for the HVAC, which I appreciate. I always appreciate a real button. Now, there's no sort of, locating nub or anything like a home row key or something like that you can just reach over and touch. But there's few enough buttons, and they're sculpted such that you can kind of figure out where your finger is without looking. So I like that. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the weird parts of this in a moment. Now, one thing you may be wondering is, okay, you didn't like the Kia Soul because it was a 2023 with USB-A. Well, we've actually got USB-A and USB-C down here. So shout out Chevrolet for actually giving us the ports that we kind of want here. There's also an aux jack there, if you can tell. Oddly enough, you can't see these things at all from my seating position. You have to really give it the reach under to get to those ports. And once you get a cable plugged in there, it's probably fine. But there's also really no place to put a large modern phone here. You can put it in the tiny cup holders. You can see it barely fits a standard water bottle. And you could snake it into here, but there's no cable pass through. So I'm not really sure what the idea is. I think this is probably for loose change or something. I don't know. Maybe a box of cigarettes would fit perfectly in this slot, actually. I hate electronic parking brakes. Pull up to turn on, push down to turn off. Whatever. It's got a parking sensor that you can turn off and on, and traction control as well. So that's fine, kind of standard. But back to these ports. I mean, listen, you've made this dashboard jut out so much because of the angle that it's at. And you can't see the ports unless you're old and sitting here super low. If you sit low enough here, like an old person, you can bend down just a little bit and actually see those ports there. See? So I think it's just an indication that the car is built for old people. You have this dashboard that's angled down and towards you, and you've got these ports that are inaccessible unless you're short or old. But then the angle of this is all wrong for being old. So it's kind of a weird, uncohesive package in here. I also feel like I spent so much time adjusting my seat, and I still feel like the pedals feel too close somehow, and like I'm sitting simultaneously too low and too high. I just haven't been able to get the seating position to work out for me. If I raise the seat anymore, my head actually touches the ceiling. I've got, I would say, about 1.5 inches of clearance right now between my head and the top of the ceiling. And then the higher you sit, the weirder this angle with the dashboard becomes. So it's really designed, I think, for, again, elderly people or people, shorter, basically. And yeah, and the way it drives feels very old as well. So I already mentioned it's got a 1.5 liter 4-cylinder, with, 160 horsepower. It's mated to an actual 7-speed transmission or a CVT that's trying to pretend to be a 7-speed transmission. I suspect it's the former though, because it is GM. And oh my God, what a slush box transmission this is. You put your foot down to try to get it to go, and the car, it does carry its weight pretty well. It's got 7 speeds, so it's got fairly short gears. But when it shifts like a 25, 30-year-old Honda with 300,000 miles, where you can kind of feel the transmission slowly disengage, and you get that like slushy deceleration, and then you can feel it engage the next gear, but like the clutch plates in the transmission or whatever, like just they engage super slowly and mushily, so you get that like thump as it shifts under power, like a 30-year-old Honda. And I think I've had a 30-year-old Honda that's felt better better shifting than this car feels. You do have the option of using the up and down buttons here to manually select gears while you're in low mode here. So that's nice to have, at least. I'll give them the benefit of actually including that. I haven't used it at all because it is so slushy. It's not satisfying to use. It's just meh. So when you're accelerating up to like merging speeds from a standstill, you're running out of merge lane and you're not quite going fast enough because the engine is strong enough to pull you, but the transmission, you lose like a full half second every time it shifts. And because those gears are so short, because the car is so heavy and large with such an underpowered engine, you lose a lot of time shifting through gears. You lose probably a second and a half into third gear by the time you're actually like closing in on highway speeds. It's just kind of a strange slushy car. Like I said, it feels old. Now I will say it actually handles pretty well. The chassis itself feels fairly stiff. You can really pack it into some corners. I've driven up into the mountains with it, and I've been flinging it around. It's got nice brakes. They are a little weird. They're kind of stagey. You press and you get some amount of braking, and you press harder and you get a little bit of progression, and then it jumps and it's like harder braking force. Instead of being like linear or something smooth, it kind of feels stagey, like a step function or something like that as you press the brakes. But they are good. They're strong. Not super feedbacky, right? Definitely feeling a little bit wooden because of that sort of step that I just described. But it was fun. I whipped it pretty hard up into the mountains. And I do run into the issues here of visibility. These are big A-pillars, fat A-pillars with these like big, door sill components here. Take up a lot of your vision out this way. Likewise, partly because of where I'm sitting, to get my legs even remotely comfortable in the pedal box, and they're really not. It kind of hurts my knee, actually, to do the switching here. I don't know why. Again, I can't really raise my seat any higher because then the gauges are weird. My head touches the ceiling. If I go back too far, then I'm too far away from the steering wheel. I can't find a comfy seating position for this car for me. It can be a little difficult with all these factors combined to sort of figure out where the edges of the car are in front. So I don't take the line that I might want to as I drive up into the mountains, and I've done this drive so many times. I know that road, but it's hard to be confident in this car on that road that I know so well. Let's see, I talked about the stagey brakes. This might be the best version of lane keep assist that I have ever felt. It is actually so subtle. It will just barely nudge you back into the lane position that it wants you to be in. It's excellent, actually. And the fact that I can turn it off and on so it doesn't yell at me or something like that by just pressing a single button and not digging into menus is awesome. I really like that. However, this button, the rear end collision warning for when you're, texting and driving and the car in front of you starts to stop and you're gonna smash into the back, that's where this little thing comes into play. This will flash red at you and it's kind of cool. It reflects off the window and back at you, so it's almost holographic or something. And the car goes beep, 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 real loud and flashes the light at you. It gets your attention, but it sucks. It goes off when I don't want it to. Like, the car in front of me slows down to start a left-hand turn. The traffic in the oncoming lane is clear. This person is going to turn left before I approach their position. At this point, I've already let off the gas pedal, and the car goes, oh my God, you're gonna hit that person, and goes beep, 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 beep. It's not active, so it doesn't slam on the brakes for you, or at least if it is active, it's not activated for me. I haven't really dug into too many settings here. I've just been driving the car as it came. And it's just like annoying. It's activated about 4 times for me, and none of the times it's activated has been any like sort of situation where I'd actually be about to rear end somebody. In 2 or 3 of the situations, I was actually actively pressing the brakes, and the car just freaks out and thinks you're gonna hit something. So that's annoying. I don't like that. I don't believe you can toggle it off. I did talk about the brakes. This is a little disjointed, my apologies. But I did talk about the brakes. I'll talk about the accelerator. Accelerator's pretty smooth. Brakes are fairly touchy, but not that bad. I still think the Kia Soul has the worst accelerator and brake feel. They're too sharp, too sudden. This car feels pretty smooth on the accelerator, especially with like an actual slush box transmission. And the brakes, again, not the most progressive, but they don't bite too hard when you gently press them. So it's a fairly easy car to drive smoothly and calmly. Real quick, let's talk about the central dash thing here and some of the funny aspects that I've noticed. And I think that'll be about it for this. The one thing before I turn the car on and have to muck with this, I think the interior is fine. These seats are nice. They've got a fairly sizable bolster, fairly soft, fairly comfy. They're, all cloth seats. They've got this patterning on the back that matches the patterning on these door cards. I really don't think that this particular door card is going to hold up well over time. You get that continued in the back seat here. Pretty good amount of legroom for a sedan, it looks like to me. 3 seats back here, no problem. Again, this is just like a car. It's nothing enjoyable, it's nothing fun. But it's not awful either. I like it better than the Kia Soul. So, okay, if I turn the car all the way on, get 9,000 lights on the dashboard. Beautiful air conditioning. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the infotainment off real quick so my Android Auto doesn't connect and muck with us. But one thing I don't like, observe, the temperature is here. And if I go into Android Auto, connect my phone, hopefully this doesn't muck up my recording. First of all, it does this like for 9 minutes. It does this for way too long before it actually gives you anything, which is stupid and annoying. Point is, when the Android, I won't even let it finish this. When Android Auto finishes connecting, there is nowhere that it lists the outside temperature. Nowhere. You can't see it unless you press like the home button to get back to this particular screen. Vehicle settings are active, are accessed here, and nothing too crazy. There's apparently a vehicle Wi-Fi hotspot, I guess, if you have that option. But you can, change some of those settings in here, no problem. And so I don't like that. And then this is really funny how long, just watch. So if I want my heated seats, I'll click the button. Did you see how long it took that heated seat icon to actually show up, or the LEDs to actually turn on? I will say that's a very effective heated seat. That was on for all of 20 seconds and whew, that's toasty already. So it's just funny how long it takes these buttons to like actually do anything. But only apparently the heated seat, because these activate pretty much as soon as I touch them. Of course I can't toggle that one back off. Like these activate with a reasonable latency. But the heated seats just why does it take so long? It's just funny. I do like the little segmented display inside the temperature control. It's pretty cool looking. I like it. As far as I can tell, these stripes don't do anything. They look like they'd be illuminated or something, but they're not. So, yeah, so like I said, here's that rear collision warning. All you can do is set the distance. You can't turn it off, and I just don't like it. It just doesn't really work for me. Perhaps another oddity is there is no rear windshield wiper for whatever reason. I think the shape of this hatch, the shape of the back of this car, necessitates a windshield wiper, but it doesn't have one. So go figure. Yeah, I guess that's kind of it. My overall review, it's a car. I would give it probably a 5 out of 10 for looks. I don't like it. I don't hate it. I would give it a 6 out of 10 for driving characteristics, because it doesn't really have much driving characteristics, but it's fine. And interior, I'm gonna give it maybe a 7 out of 10. I'm not a huge fan of some of the parts, like I mentioned, the angles and stuff, but I think the interior is pretty nice for what you pay for. And yeah, I think it's a Chevy. I think that's the gist. It's a Chevy.